swore cheating was a deal breaker, then I did it myself, and my husband is done with me. The house is silent now. No keys on the counter, no shoes by the door, just me and the dogs pacing the kitchen. 3 months ago, I still had a husband. Today, there's only an empty closet and a wedding band that feels heavier than it ever did when he was here. I swore cheating would be my line in the sand. I said it to friends, to my husband, even to strangers at dinner parties. After my first boyfriend betrayed me in college, I vowed I would never be the one who destroyed someone's trust. Loyal, safe, someone you could count on. That was me until it wasn't. Typing these words feels like peeling off my own skin. I crossed the line I'd always preached about, and I crossed it with my eyes open. No alcohol to blame, no confusion, no sudden mistake. I knew exactly what I was doing, every time. Some mornings I just sit at the kitchen table staring into my coffee. I used to lecture friends about cheating. Now I'm the one who did it. I don't even recognize myself. Back then, before he moved out, across the hallway, my husband slept in the spare room. When I look at him now, I still see flashes of the man I married. We built a life that, from the outside, looked steady and ordinary. No kids by choice, a small house, 2 dogs, weekend routines. For years, I believed our love was the kind that grows roots and holds no matter the weather. Now that belief feels like a canyon between the woman I thought I was and the woman sitting here writing this. I used to read confessions like this and shake my head. How could someone do that to their partner? How could they sleep next to someone and carry such a secret? Yet here I am. I swore cheating was my line in the sand. Then, inch by inch, I stepped over it until there was no line at all. I met him when I was 22, working my first real job. He was 24, calm and steady in a way that felt rare. We met through mutual friends at a coffee shop. Nothing dramatic happened, no sparks flying across the room. Just a man who listened when I spoke, who made me laugh without trying, who walked me to my car when the rain began. After a string of unreliable boyfriends, that small kindness felt enormous. I felt safe with him almost immediately. We dated for 5 years before we married. By then, we had built habits that felt like a life. Friday nights at the same neighborhood restaurant, lazy Sundays with our dogs at the park, inside jokes only we understood. We moved in together after 3 years, bought a small house with a yard big enough for our 2 rescues. Early on, we agreed we didn't want children. It wasn't a fight, not even a debate. We both liked the idea of building a quiet, simple life, and for a long time, that's exactly what we had. Our wedding was small, close family, a few friends, nothing fancy. I still remember how he looked at me during our vows. It was the first time I thought, this is permanent. Even now, thinking of that day hurts because I remember how sure I was. We weren't perfect, but we were solid, or so I told myself. About 3 years ago, the shift began, small enough to miss if you weren't looking. At first, it was just more late nights at the office, messages that he'd be home after I'd already eaten. Sometimes he took his dinner into the living room while I stayed at the table, telling myself work stress explained it all. In bed, we became 2 people sharing space instead of a life. His back often turned, my phone in my hand, both of us scrolling instead of talking. The little touches that once came so easily, his hand on my knee under the table, my palm on his shoulder in passing, vanished one by one. I told myself it was a season we'd ride out together. But nights stretched into months, and passing turned into drifting. By the time I realized how far apart we'd grown, we were already living like polite strangers. Our intimacy thinned, then disappeared. Friends noticed. I smiled and said we were fine. I still carried the groceries, walked the dogs, paid the bills, and threw myself into work. On my birthday, he forgot a card. It was a small thing, but I carried it like a stone because it reminded me of how little I said about my own hurt. In November, he booked a weekend away, a place I always wanted to see. I imagined long walks and dinners by the water. Instead, we argued the first night. 6 months later, he tried again, the same pattern. I remember the bathroom mirror that second night, fluorescent light buzzing overhead, my palms flat on the counter. Through the thin hotel wall, he slept, while I whispered to my reflection, "Why am I trying so hard for something that isn't working?" I grew up believing cheating was the one thing you could never come back from. My mother drilled it into me when I was a teenager. If you're unhappy, leave first. Don't betray someone who trusts you. Even in small temptations, I'd always walked away. I thought that made me strong. After our second failed trip, I began to question what loyalty meant. We had both withdrawn, only no one had said it out loud. Every time I tried to talk about our distance, he turned inward, short answers or silence. Some nights he left without saying where he was going, and I stopped asking. Eventually, I moved into the guest room. My ring stayed on my finger, but it felt like a prop. I told myself I was still a wife, but I no longer felt like one. Then a new manager arrived at work, late 30s, quiet, attentive. We started having lunch in the break room, just project talk at first, then books and movies. He remembered small things I said. He noticed when I cut my hair. He asked about my day. It was the kind of noticing that had disappeared at home. I didn't plan anything. I didn't even think of him that way at first. But slowly I began to look forward to seeing him more than going home. One Friday we stayed late finishing a report. Everyone else had left. He offered to walk me to my car. The parking lot was dark and still. We stood there for a moment, both aware of something unspoken. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm just tired," I said, though what I wanted was to tell him everything. That night I drove home thinking about how long it had been since someone asked if I was okay and meant it. Over the next few weeks our lunches stretched longer. We started texting in the evenings, work at first, then nothing at all. I told myself it was harmless, that I wasn't the kind of person who cheats. Yet I began dressing differently for work. I started checking my phone at night in another room. My husband didn't notice or didn't care. I couldn't tell which was worse. The first time we kissed, it was raining, a thin, silver end-of-shift rain. We had both stayed late again. He walked me to my car. I turned to say goodbye, and he touched my face. It felt as if something inside me broke and flooded at the same time, a surge I hadn't felt in years. I kissed him back without thinking. When I drove away, my hands were shaking, my heart hammering against the steering wheel. I told myself it would not happen again. I told myself it was a mistake. At home, I took a long shower and stared at my wedding ring on the sink. But it did happen again. The following week, we met for coffee on a Saturday morning. I told my husband I was going to the grocery store. We sat in the back of a small cafe. He reached for my hand. I let him. At that moment, I felt seen. I felt alive. I also felt sick with guilt. I had crossed the line my mother warned me about. I had become the person I swore I would never be. I tried to stop it. I told him we could not do this. He said he understood, but he kept looking at me the same way, and I kept giving in. We did not sleep together for several weeks, but the emotional intimacy was already an affair. I found myself sharing things I had not told my husband in years. At home, my husband still did not ask where I was or who I was with. The silence in our house grew heavier. The conversations at work grew deeper. Looking back, I think I wanted to be caught. I started leaving my phone on the counter unlocked. I stopped deleting messages. Part of me hoped my husband would notice, get angry, demand answers, fight for me. He did not. He stayed on his side of the wall, and I drifted further away. The other man and I had been circling the edge for weeks, coffees that stretched into hours, texts that slipped from jokes into confessions, his hand resting on mine a moment too long. One Thursday evening, we both stayed late at the office. Rain pressed against the windows. Everyone else had gone. We talked until the cleaners had finished and left. When he touched my face, I froze, then leaned in. It wasn't sudden or accidental. It was the next step in something we'd already built. By the time we finally crossed the last line physically, my marriage already felt like an empty room. Stepping into his arms felt less like passion and more like relief from a hunger I hadn't admitted to anyone. I drove home afterwards with my hands shaking, telling myself it would never happen again, knowing even then that it probably would. I am not proud of this. Writing it down makes my stomach twist. There were 100 moments when I could have stopped. There were 100 choices I could have made differently. I could have demanded counseling. I could have left. Instead, I chose to betray the vow I once thought sacred. At the time, it felt like survival. Now it feels like a wound I gave to both of us. It was a Thursday night when everything came apart. I had just come back from a late meeting with him. I walked into the house and saw my husband at the kitchen table with my phone in his hand. I had left it there when I went to shower. He was staring at the screen without moving. For a second, I thought he had fallen asleep sitting up. Then he looked up and his face was flat, no expression at all. He said my name once. That was all. On the screen was a string of messages between me and the other man. Nothing explicit but enough to show the truth. Times, locations, emojis. My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My husband asked how long it had been going on. His voice was low and steady. I told him 3 months ago. He asked if we had slept together. I said yes. He put the phone down like it was something dirty. He stood up and walked past me without another word. I followed him to the living room. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. I kept saying I was sorry, but the words sounded useless even to me. He asked why. I started to explain about the distance, the coldness, the feeling of being invisible. He cut me off and said, "You could have left. You didn't have to do this." That sentence hit me harder than anything else. He was right. I could have left. We stayed in the same room for hours without speaking. The dogs lay between us, their heads on their paws, as if they could sense the fracture spreading across the floor. Around midnight, he rose, picked up a pillow, and walked into the guest room. The door closed softly. I sat on the couch staring at the black television screen until morning light crept through the curtains. My phone buzzed once. It was the other man, asking if I was okay. I let the message sit unopened. The next day, my husband did not go to work. He packed a small bag and left the house without telling me where. He came back after dark, face blank, eyes burning. For the first time, I saw rage in him instead of distance. He asked me to give him space. I tried to apologize again. I wrote a letter and left it on his pillow. It stayed there unopened until I removed it myself. He started sleeping with headphones on. He would disappear for hours at a time. I did not know if he was seeing someone or simply driving aimlessly. The silence was heavier than any argument we had ever had. I still went to work and still saw the other man, but I told him it had to end. He said he would wait for me. I gave him no promise. 2 weeks after discovery, my husband agreed to one counseling session. We sat across from a woman with a notebook in a small office that smelled of coffee. I tried to explain my side. He did not look at me once. When it was his turn, he said he had nothing to say. On the drive home, he told me he was not sure he wanted to keep trying. I asked if he was leaving. He said he did not know yet. That night, I lay awake listening to him move in the other room. I thought about how I had once believed cheating was the one thing that could destroy a marriage. Now I was inside the destruction I had created. I thought about my mother's warning. I thought about the woman I had been when we first met. I wondered if she would even recognize me. He still has not decided what to do. Some days he speaks to me as if nothing happened. Other days he will not meet my eyes. He has not touched me since the night in the kitchen. The moment he looked at me with no expression and said, "You could have left," plays over and over in my mind. I have stopped seeing the other man. I told him it was over and blocked his number. It did not feel like a victory. It felt like closing the door on a room built entirely from lies. Now I come home to a house that feels hollow. I feed the dogs. I do the laundry. I wait for a decision that may never come. I do not know if my husband will forgive me or if he even wants to. All I know is that I crossed a line I cannot uncross, and now I live inside its consequences. It has been almost 3 months since that night in the kitchen. We are still in the same house, but it does not feel like home anymore. We move around each other like polite strangers. We exchange quick updates about bills, groceries, and the dogs. He no longer wears his wedding ring. I still wear mine, even though it feels like a lie against my skin. Every morning I wake before he does and make coffee. I leave his cup on the counter like a ritual from another life. Sometimes he takes it without a word. Sometimes he pours it down the sink and brews his own. He leaves for work earlier now. He does not text me during the day when he comes back. I deleted everything connected to the other man. Messages, photographs, the hidden email account. I thought purging the evidence would make me feel cleaner. It did not. It only left me alone with my thoughts. I replay every choice in my head. The first coffee, the first time I let my hand rest on his arm too long, the first lie I told my husband about where I was. Each step felt small at the time, but looking back, it is like watching myself walk off a cliff in slow motion. My husband has not told his family. He has not told our friends. I do not know if he is protecting me or shielding himself from embarrassment. We go to therapy once a week, but the sessions feel lopsided. I talk. He sits. The therapist asks him to describe his feelings, and he shrugs or says he does not know. Sometimes he stays silent for the entire hour. I sit there wishing I could go back and shake the version of me who thought an affair would fill the emptiness. One night last week, he came home late. I was on the couch with the dogs. He smelled of beer. He sat across from me and said he had been looking at apartments. My stomach dropped. I asked if he was leaving. He said he did not know yet. He asked if I was still seeing the other man. I said no. He nodded as if that was expected. He went to the guest room without another word. I stayed on the couch until morning. I used to think cheating was black and white. If you did it, you were done. I told every boyfriend before him that cheating was my line in the sand. I told him too. When I saw him laughing too closely with a colleague at a work event last year, something inside me clenched. It wasn't cheating, but it stirred an old fear in me. I even drafted a divorce in my head, though nothing had happened. I stayed, but a seed of resentment had been planted. Now I am the one who crossed the line, not once but many times, and the mirror does not show a righteous woman anymore. It shows someone who can wound the person she promised to protect. Sometimes I catch him looking at me when he thinks I am not paying attention. His face is unreadable. I do not know if it is hate, sadness, or exhaustion. We used to share small jokes, little glances across the room. Now there is nothing. He has lost weight. He spends hours running on the treadmill in the garage. I hear the machine at night while I sit in our bed staring at the wall. The sound makes me feel sick. Friends have started to notice. They ask if we're okay, and I tell them we're working through stuff. Nobody knows the truth except the therapist and us. Sometimes I think about messaging him again just to feel wanted. Then I remember the look on my husband's face in the kitchen, and I put the phone down. I do not want to add another layer of damage. I keep thinking about the day we met 21 years ago. We were both broke, working at the same coffee shop. He used to draw small cartoons on my paper cups. We used to talk about everything. We built a life from nothing. We decided not to have kids because we wanted freedom, travel, and projects. Now the house feels like an empty shell with two people pretending. I do not know if he will ever forgive me. I do not even know if I deserve it. Some nights I think about packing a bag and leaving to make it easier for him, but then I remember the dogs, the mortgage, the history. I stay. I wait. He has not said he is done, but he has not said he is staying either. It is like living on a fault line, waiting for the next tremor. In therapy, my counselor asked me what I wanted. I couldn't answer. I want the old version of us, but she's gone. I want to undo what I did, but that's impossible. I want to be the woman who never betrayed her husband. But I am. I'm the person who did the things she swore she'd never do. And that truth sits heavy in my chest every single day. This is my reality now, waiting for a man who may never come back, sweeping up the wreckage I created, staring at a marriage that might already be over. Writing it here is the only place I can be honest without meeting someone's eyes and seeing the disappointment reflected back. He has actually moved out now. The house is silent in a way I've never heard before. No keys on the counter, no shoes by the door, just me and the dog. I stood in the driveway after the movers left and felt the air sucked out of my lungs. The rooms look bigger now, but emptier. His side of the closet is a bare wall. The bathroom mirror no longer smells of his aftershave. It's just me. I keep touching my wedding band. It feels like a prop. Part of me wants to shove it into a drawer. Part of me keeps it on because taking it off would make the loss too real. Friends tell me to focus on myself, to heal. They mean well, but they don't see the loop in my head. Every time I sit down to eat, drive to work, fold laundry, I'm replaying everything. The messages, the nights I slipped out, the look on his face, the quiet way he packed his things, the way he didn't even ask for another chance. There was no screaming, no grand confession, just two people who built a life, broke it, and walked away. I used to think cheating was a single act. Living with the fallout is 1,000 small ones: signing papers, dividing furniture, explaining to people, sleeping alone, feeding the dog, staring at a text you'll never send. It's a slow dismantling. I've started therapy on my own. Not to win him back, he's gone, but to figure out why everyone acts like I'm the only one who broke something. I crossed my own boundary, yes, but I also stayed for years while our marriage withered. Why didn't I leave before I cheated? Because I kept hoping someone would notice me. I kept hoping he would. Some days I feel guilty. Other days I feel furious at the judgment, like people are missing the whole story. Maybe therapy will help me sort out which part is shame and which part is just being tired of carrying all the blame. I want to build a version of me who can look in the mirror without flinching, and maybe even without apologizing for everything. If you're standing on the edge where I once stood, I'm not here to preach. I want you to see what's actually on the other side, not freedom, not excitement. It's 3 a.m. in a silent kitchen, the dog curled at your feet, a mug of bitter coffee in your hands, scrolling through the texts you once hid and seeing a stranger in your own words. That's what waits when you cross the line you're imagining. I swore cheating was a deal breaker. Then I crossed my own line, and he called it what it was. No pleading, no second chances. He walked out with his head high and left me in the silence I created.